Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting the event very shortly. Please find a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, please find a seat. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please find a seat. We'll be starting in a minute or two. Yeah. Hey, Dan, how are you? Good. We're going to start soon. Good evening, fellow directors, past presidents, members, and guests. Welcome to the 116th season of the Empire Club of Canada. I'm proud to host tonight's festivity featuring fresh faces from Ottawa. I am Mike Van Solen. I'm the president of Empire Club. I call this meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather. It is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, because without our sponsors' generosity, we could not host events like this. I would like to thank Crestview Strategy. I would like to thank OMERS, Bruce Power, our events partner, mediaevents.ca, and our media partner, The National Post. Thank you very much. I'd also like to say that you can find the Empire Club on Twitter, so if you wanted to broadcast tonight's event beyond these walls, it's Empire_Club. And then, what are we gathered here tonight for? This is an Empire night, and this is a little different than our regular luncheons, if you've ever been to those. But it's really a simple concept, which is that we come out, what we find is we get interested, civic engaged people with interests in different topics. We provide an opportunity for networking, a drink, some past food, and then we put really smart people on stage to dig deeper into a topic, one of interest to all. And then there's an opportunity, of course, afterwards to unpack that a little bit when the folks are off the stage. So with that, don't feel you need to rush off when we're done up here. There is a time to mix and mingle a little bit after that as well. So with that, let's get into this evening. The arrival of a new crop of MPs on the Hill is not unlike Frosh Week at university. It's heady, exciting time, it's a new beginning, and anything could happen. The last federal election saw 98 new MPs. With representatives from every party. 60 of these new MPs came from ridings that flipped from the past party. Their ranks included activists, Olympians, and mayors, and all of them bright-eyed and bushy-tailed optimists who will bring fresh ideas and new voices to our politics. Today it's my honor to welcome these three new members of this new generation of parliamentarians to our stage. We have with us here today Mumilaaq Qaqqaq, the NDP MP for Nunavut. She was only 25 years old when she was elected, but you may recognize her from the profound and moving speech she gave in the House of Commons on the International Women's Day in 2017. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to look at YouTube and do that, because it is, you will understand the excitement around Mumilaaq. Welcome Mumilaaq to the stage. Next up is Eric Duncan, the Conservative MP for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry. Duncan won his riding in a landslide. He is the face of a new generation of Conservatives, young, principled, and diverse. As an openly gay man in a party grappling with questions about pride, his voice at the table will be essential on that matter and many others. Eric. Adam van Koeverden is also here tonight, the former Olympian and gold medalist, won one of the tightest races going, something he had experience doing in sport and now also in politics. He is the Liberal MP for Milton, the third member of our panel tonight. Adam. And moderating tonight's discussion is Marieke Walsh, political reporter for the Globe and Mail. She is also a relatively fresh face in Ottawa, having only recently joined the paper's parliamentary bureau there, but she wasted no time making her mark. We are honored that she is here tonight. Marieke, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It's actually kind of warm in Toronto in February, which is a nice change of pace. I think one of the fun things about this panel, I mean, it's called Fresh Faces, but the oldest person on the panel is still more than a decade younger than the average age of an MP in Ottawa. So I think that you will see some different perspectives tonight, and I think that it will shape your view of Ottawa, or maybe sort of change your view of how you perceive the House of Commons in Ottawa. I didn't out anybody in their age, I don't think.
We were just discussing which one of us is.
I'll let somebody else do that part. But essentially, we're going to kind of look at this kind of in stages, starting with how these MPs came to partisan politics, having very diverse backgrounds and experiences beforehand, and then kind of moving into what they want to see going forward. So, starting with the decision to enter party politics, someone like Eric, who comes from municipal politics, I think that's a very different experience. But how did you decide to enter party politics, and what was that decision like?
So thank you very much, everybody, for having me tonight. It's great to be here, and another these pinch me moments that I have every day over the course of the last few months getting these opportunities. So I started off gently in municipal politics at the age of 18. I got elected as a councillor in my hometown, the township of North Dundas. My hometown is the town of South Mountain, population 300. And during the South Mountain Fair, the third weekend in August, it grows to 10,000 partiers. And so for my community, municipal politics was kind of a natural level of entry for somebody that's interested in community service. And I was always a volunteer. I started off volunteering in our local riding associations, federally and provincially. Started off as a get out the vote organizer in my area, and eventually worked up to be a campaign manager and an EA to my predecessor as MP Guy Lauzon. But yeah, municipal politics is totally different, I find, than federal politics in terms of campaigning. The one thing I found different for me in federal politics, whenever you're going door to door municipally, knocking on a door, hi, I'm Eric Duncan, I'm running for council. If they didn't know you, they had the chance to get to know you and vote based on you. In federal politics, if they don't like the way that Andrew Scheer smiled or didn't smile one day, or on one policy issue that you may not have had a say on, it was done before you even got to the door type of thing. So that was an adjustment for me, that there are bigger factors that way. And I said, heaven forbid a party leader tripped an elderly senior, or dropped a baby or something, your campaign or career could be over type of thing. Yeah, your career's in somebody else's hands that way, I always joked, right? So that was something that was a new adjustment for me that way, of where municipal politics, you're used to making your own bed and laying in it type of thing. But in federal politics, you're subject to forces beyond your control, which is something I've had to adjust to.
And Adam, I guess Eric has been a conservative from day one, or as far as I can tell. Was that the same experience for you going into the Liberal Party? And given your career before the Liberal Party, how did you decide to enter party politics?
Well, I guess somewhat facetiously, I'm used to wearing red, and whereas Eric is probably more used to wearing like the agnostic yellow and purple. It was a natural fit for me because, as I've been saying throughout the last year or so, I think there's good ideas in the left and there's good ideas in the right. I can think of lots, and I'm not terribly interested in politics, to be honest. I think some people get involved for the politics. I'm interested in public service, and it's not a joke. The politics are just how you get to do great public service, to assist on important policy and to help your neighbors. Sometimes politics is seen as a bit of a combative or necessarily ugly sport. I didn't have to resort to any of those tactics to be a successful Olympic athlete, and I don't need to sink to that level to be a successful public servant either. So when I crossed the finish line at the Olympics in my last and final race in Rio de Janeiro, I was sort of like a lot of athletes faced with a decision. There's not a lot of jobs in the world where you almost need to retire at 35. Some athletes manage to keep going until they're 40 or so, but I knew as soon as I crossed the finish line that my career was over and I wanted to find something else to do. I didn't want to, and there's nothing wrong with writing a memoir and doing the speaker circuit, but I just didn't want to do that. I didn't feel like I was ready to retire. I didn't want to, put my feet up. I also know that great communities and great countries don't happen by accident. I think they happen intentionally, and it requires hard work and dedication from people who are willing to stick up for other folks. So my decision to enter politics was largely one that was born out of a desire to serve my country and my community.
And Mumilaaq, I think that you kind of sprung into the national stage in 2017 with your daughters, with the speech you gave in the House of Commons and the Daughters of the Vote. How did it go from that for you to deciding to run for election?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to start from. I didn't have the greatest experience, to say the least, during Daughters of the Vote Equal Voice. It was an opportunity for me to have that national stage to launch me into a bunch of other things. I got to work with the Inuit Debelit Canada, or the National Advocacy Organization for Inuit. I worked with Mumilaaq Qaqqaq for a number of weeks, and with Northern Youth Abroad shortly after that had happened. My decision in running for politics at the federal level was a conversation very shortly before the writ dropped. And I had a friend that come over and had asked if I was interested. So I'm not going to repeat the language that I used at the time, but it was something along the lines of, just so we're clear, you're asking me to run for Member of Parliament for Nunavut with NDP. And the individual said yes. I said, okay, there's a couple of things I need to do. I need to call my mom, talk to my mom. Everything that I do that really affects my life is a conversation with her first. I wanted to really dive and do my research and make myself a lot more aware of where NDP stands on a lot of critical things. One of the decision-making aspects was what was the stance on the sealing industry was really important to me. And overall, my final decision was Jagmeet Singh. I couldn't run for a leader that I didn't believe in. That I and Jagmeet and I have a very amazing working relation, and we have each other's backs within my party. So it all happened really quickly. My life was absolutely bonkers in 2019 with all the changes, even more so than 2017, which was almost as crazy. But I think the starting point is, for me, is just people coming up to me that believed in me, and I decided to take the opportunity, and I'm sitting here now, so I guess things worked out.
Yeah, I think they worked out pretty spectacularly for all three of you. I think a lot of you had different odds and different challenges, but it strikes me that all three of you have really been thrust into the spotlight as an MP very early on. Some MPs kind of run under the radar for 30 years, and you guys didn't even have 2 minutes, I don't think. So how has it been for you, joining the Hill, transitioning to a more public life? Some of you have had public lives in other ways, but this seems to be maybe a different or a bigger platform. I don't know, Adam, if you want to start with that.
Sure, I don't mind starting. Well, I mean, you mentioned it. I have had a public life before. Being an international athlete meant that I, had done an interview before. I had traveled a lot, had a busy schedule. I'd also take this opportunity to acknowledge that I wouldn't be here today if it was not for an Inuit invention. Mm-hmm. So the kayak is something that I used. It's an Inuit invention. It's a boat that was used for exploration and hunting and all sorts of other things. And as a white guy from Oakville, I feel like I have an obligation to say Nakamik every time I have the opportunity to for the invention of the kayak. It's a great vehicle that not just brought me 1,000 meters in a race, but it brought me around the world. I was grateful for that opportunity, and I see politics and public service as another vehicle for opportunity. That the transition into a public life wasn't such a big deal for me. It's a little bit more of, and we talked about it the other day. Journalism in sport is you're sitting down with a friend. Almost every journalist that works in sport is a sports fan. And it's different when you're, knocking on doors to talk to people about politics or to sit down at a coffee shop and discuss certain policies or your position with a journalist. So that's been the biggest transition for me is the fact that when you're an Olympic athlete, everybody's cheering for you. When you're a liberal, I don't know, some percentage of you are...
35%.
Okay, you know the numbers. Yeah. In my community, it was like 55%. But,
Okay, yeah.
And I've got a few constituents here that are like, 52.
Journalists might be a bit different than political journalists, just a hunch.
Yeah.
What about for you, Eric? Is there advice that you got in the transition to partisan politics from sort of more consensus-building politics in the municipal level?
The first thing I noticed about federal politics is the change of pace. I was busy as a mayor and a regional chair, and I was also working, as I mentioned, as an EA to my predecessor as MP, so wearing lots of different hats and being involved in the community, and I thought I was busy and the pace was something. This new job was a whole other level. And I have to say, last week I felt really good. We were in the House of Commons. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Adam. Adam comes over for a chat saying we're doing this panel, and so he said, "How are you enjoying the job so far?" I said, "It's good." I said, "It's tiring. But your adrenaline goes." And he goes, "Yeah, I can. Some days it can be tiring." And I thought, okay, if the gold medal Olympian is tired, I don't feel so bad as well. The same thing in terms of the pace and this between committees and media responsibilities and going back to your riding and just a myriad of different factors coming at you. It's been a big change that way too of trying. I think the most challenging thing for myself has been time management. Everybody wants your ear for a minute on a myriad of different topics, but representing your riding within the caucus process, committee, the House, all those different things and local files is something that's a big change for sure. So that's been the biggest adjustment, is just trying to prioritize your day and the odd time. Like I now have to schedule time to do my laundry at my house. Life is so busy, but it's a good problem. But that's something that's been an adjustment for me.
Now, do you schedule the laundry time, or does somebody else do that for you?
I need to go in and say, no, Thursday mornings I just need an extra couple hours at home to do laundry. Yeah, I can look after that part. But and the point too about personal time and just even going to the gym or exercising type of thing is those things that go to the wayside. Your personal aspect as well. And I think in the job for a lot of people, a lot of members that are retired that have come back to give advice to new members, and even those that have been there is you've got to look after yourself, and you have to look after yourself and take that, because if you don't, and in my case, I'm single that way, but if you have a family, they can sometimes vouch and do that. If you don't, your time will just be eating up your schedule, and I think it'll affect your health physically and mentally in the long run as well. So it's just an important thing that pretty well every member gives that piece of advice on.
And Mumilaaq, I think I saw on your social media that people are stopping you in the malls already. It's kind of rare, I think, for MPs even to be recognized in their own riding, let alone in across Canada. So what's the transition been like for you?
I think we'll start with not very many MPs look like this, so it's pretty easy to recognize me. There's a lot of Assembly First Nations events that go on. It's where a lot of organizations that are Indigenous based come together quite often. I think the biggest transition for me is I'm fine with being go, go, go. I'm fine jumping one meeting to another. I'm fine being slipped into an interview. I'm fine going into a meeting with a minister. The hard part that I have being able to grasp is understanding, while keeping in mind we just passed the anniversary of Colton Bushy's death. We see what's going on Wet'suwet'en territories. And to me, the most difficult part is understanding that now I'm in the heartbeat of this system that at one point was meant to eliminate people that look like me, eliminate that sense of identity, that sense of culture. I'm very fortunate in the party leader that I have in that way. I go for lunches and suppers with Jagmeet, and we can talk about those difficulties in being a minority and looking the way that we do in politics. My party is also very open to that, but I have a really hard time trying to sit down with other people and explain why this doesn't work. And it hasn't been for decades for Indigenous peoples, and I think that's my biggest transition, is the own kind of like moral battle that goes on in my head quite often. The go, go, go is great. It's the other aspect of trying to change perspectives and show perspectives and create that awareness. So I think that's been the biggest transition for myself.
And when you say this doesn't work, what specifically are you referring to in that?
There's so many things when we talk about mental health, when we talk about housing, when we talk about education. What that looks like to you is gonna most likely look different than it does in the north. And it's all those cultural aspects. When we think of disciplining a child, what does that look like? We all already have our own perspective of what is acceptable to us and what isn't. And we're all gonna come from different aspects. So when you're not raised in a southern atmosphere with that kind of mannerism and those gestures and what the norm is down here, then how can you expect people that come from a totally different way of thinking and a totally way of life to just kind of slip right in? And that's what we're expected to do, is live these dual lives. So I think it's interesting to try and have those perspectives heard and seen, and help other people grasp a better understanding of why it may or may not work.
And how do you see, or do you see the potential to work with the other parties? And maybe all three of you can jump in on this if you're talking about these long-standing challenges. How do you see the opportunity to work with the government, to work with other opposition parties?
Definitely. I think one of the breath of fresh air, I'm the first to hold a seat with NDP in almost 40 years in my riding. And I think that I get to speak about things very frankly, very straightforward, our realities just as they are. I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. And I've always been a very open and transparent individual. And if I can't do that, then that makes me feel absolutely crazy. And I think there's nothing but opportunities to be able to work with the other parties, especially being in a minority government, to be able to make sure that more of that consultation and collaboration is there, so that we are being open and respectful with one another and holding each other accountable to things that we need to.
And Eric, in the early days of this government, I mean, the election happened in October, but I think there's only been like 3 weeks or 4 weeks of the House sitting. It hasn't been very much, but are you seeing that collaboration happening, or what are you seeing as a new face on the Hill?
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised by it, and I tell my constituents, they ask how the experience goes so far. I say question period happens every day, and that's what most people watch. And then the 6 o'clock or the news that they get, and whatever means they get that. But there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and what hit me and kind of inspired me in one sense too, in terms of the cooperation within the House among parties, was the day we were electing the Speaker, the first day, and then the speech from the throne. I was very impressed by the number of members from different parties talking to each other, seeing members from other parties that had established relationships, and then even myself going over to talk to other, Neil Ellis, who was a former mayor of Belleville, second-term Liberal member from Bay of Quinte, Mark Gerritsen, member from Kingston, the Islands, another former mayor, was able to go over and have those conversations and those connections with. And I've been impressed. There's been a few times I've gone over to ministers where for an example, in my riding, we have a bunch of surplus Transport Canada lands along the waterfront in the city of Cornwall. They've declared that surplus, and now the discussion is about how do we best devolve that from the federal government. Does it go to local municipality? Does it go to private development? So I went over and talked to Mark Garneau, the Minister of Transport, and I said, I'm hoping to get the chance to have lunch or a coffee with you and your staff. Absolutely, here's the email of who you need to get a hold of, and we're in the process of doing that. So I always say there's the question period, there's the social media clips. That is a necessary part of politics. That's not going away. But I've been pleasantly surprised behind the scenes how open ministers, parliamentary secretaries are to go say, look, I've got this issue in my riding. Can we work together on this? And a few months in, it's been so far so good. So we'll see how long that ends up. In the threat of an election, we'll see how it goes. But I've been optimistic, and I think the message has been back and forth very good. On issues where you can get along, issues you can get things done, do what I think has been the premise.
And Adam, what's the view from sort of inside the government, but in a position where you do have to work across party lines? Are you seeing that collaboration, even from you as a backbencher, or you're a parliamentary secretary, but you're not in the cabinet? Do you have access to cabinet? How does that go?
I certainly do, and I would agree with Eric that the theater of Parliament is certainly not indicative of the rapport that goes on behind the scenes. But then as soon as question period's over, I've been across the floor at both of my colleagues' desks to talk. Whether it was just, hey, I'm going to see you next week. Would you, you're coming to a place that I consider my home. I was born in Toronto, and every time I've been to Cornwall, it's usually just to stop and get some gas on the way to Montreal. But I have
got to change that.
Yeah, I have been to Nunavut a couple of times, and I've only ever encountered wonderful hospitality in the north, and it was just an opportunity to come across and meet somebody. I know that we have a lot of shared priorities, whether that's progress in the north or progress on LGBTQ issues. Those are issues that everybody can agree needs to happen. More than that, Mumilaaq and I are serving on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee together, and I'm looking forward to being able to get some really important work done. I certainly did not get involved in this game to argue and to quabble, or if that's a word, squabble.
Quibble, squabble, whatever.
I don't think progress is born out of that sort of conflict. I think progress is made when people are willing to come together, identify shared priorities, and get to work. And that's the one thing that hasn't really occurred yet. We've had some pre-committee meetings, but most committees haven't met yet. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, a lot of the progress, a lot of that building of consensus, and a lot of that discovery really comes out of the work on committee. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm fortunate enough to serve on 2 committees, one of which is Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I think we chatted about which one we're not on a shared committee, but I'm also with Heritage when there's sport issues. So I'm really excited to get to work on those. I think people often ask, are you dividing your time between local issues? Are you more focused on the bigger, if they want to call them bigger issues, like federally? And it's a balance. Striking that balance has been a little bit of a challenge, or at least an opportunity to learn. But there's time in Ottawa, and there's time back home, and there's time, for both priorities and all those different things that, just pop up in our calendar, as you said, like, what is this event? Where am I supposed to be right now? And that's kind of new, because in a previous life, I kind of knew why I was in the room, and occasionally now you're sort of just on your feet.
Right, and I want to turn the page a little bit into the more personal side of this and pick on you for a second, Eric, because I think I was one of probably 500 media requests you got maybe every day for 3 weeks in the fall, 4 weeks. I don't know. You can tell us what it was like, but what was it like? You're the first openly gay MP for the Conservative Party, and you have this role and this platform now at this time when your party is contending with it. So what was it like for you to be on the inside, facing that extra scrutiny, and how did you decide how to handle it?
So I always premise this when I talk about my background and my perspective. I've talked more about my sexuality in the last 6-7 months I have in my entire 32 years. So we talk about things that are new for me. This is certainly one of where I'm asked. But as a positive, I always go back to my coming out story. So in 2017, I came out publicly. I was mayor of my small rural community, and I did a letter on Facebook, actually through a blog, and it went viral in a positive way, and it was nothing but a positive experience. It was news for about 48 hours. Everybody wanted to tell me about the gay person that they knew and asked if they, in the small town, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, that is really, really wrong that you're thinking that I would know I do know that person. It is really, come on. But anyway, no, it was a wonderful experience. It was positive, and I saw firsthand how far our country has come in a short period of time. The microcosm of my background, in the rural community, small C conservative, lots of churches and people of faith, it just was not an issue, or it was a positive thing to say, good, you got that out there. And I said the next day people were calling me to complain about a pothole or a road that wasn't done, and how we just moved on. So for me, on the national level now, it's been different having to not justify, I defend in one sense that perspective of where we're going. And so to be honest, whenever during the campaign, I'd made some comments during the campaign. Afterwards in the election, as we did a postmortem of what worked well and what didn't work well, I was asked, and every time somebody said or didn't say something, I had 17 media requests asking for my comment on it. And to be honest, to be frank, I was maybe a little bit bitter about it, thinking, okay, to be the token gay guy that gets asked this all the time. But after a while, I actually had a friend, a colleague in the OLO, that said to me in a paraphrased, blunt, positive way, you've got a voice and you've got an opportunity here, and use it, of where you have a background, you have a perspective. And in my riding, again, of where in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, I got just shy of 54% of the vote. It was the second best conservative finish in Eastern Canada. And I don't say it to brag about it, but my point being is, it's just not an issue. We talk about it in the country, even there. If it was, our riding has got a strong record of small C conservatism. If it was an issue, I would have lost votes compared to my predecessor. We gained votes, we've been up. And so I say that of where we've come a long way in such a short period of time. So I've reluctantly embraced the role or the perspective that I have to say about, as we go to this leadership race, about looking forward. I say I don't know exactly what's going to win or be our perfect path to a majority government in the next election, but I know what is not the right path and what people want to talk about and what people don't want to talk about, and go back and rehash. So I've enjoyed the opportunity, and I've been actually just overwhelmed within our caucus of MPs and just party members, how people are saying, yeah, we're not going back down this road again of rehashing these things, and wanting to be what I call fiscally conservative and socially relevant, I think is where the Conservative Party needs to be today. So that's I'm lucky to be able to have a voice and do that. And the other thing I say is, in the UK, just out of context, Boris Johnson and the UK Conservatives just elected 20 gay Conservative members of Parliament. And I was the first, and they've had them for several decades now. So if I can kind of be that person that's the first, or the person that's the second, that's the fifth, that's the 10th, it makes it easier. That's a role I'm anxious to play and wanting to play.
And so was it that staffer in the OLO saying that kind of ignited you to start talking, or what flipped the switch for you?
Yeah, that was certainly helpful, and I think the response as well. So as I started doing, I joke I'm a huge political junkie in Canada, the US, and UK. And so I was joking earlier that when we had a leadership candidate come out talking about whether being gay was a choice or not, I can be the scientific fact that it was not a choice. And I use my proof that if it was, and I wanted to be a member of Parliament in my community, I probably wouldn't have chosen to be gay at the age, and run to be a Conservative member of Parliament. That wouldn't have been the natural path I would have chosen. But so I did several media interviews, and that, to me, the response that I got from those interviews, from, again, party members and party leaders saying, like, that is the direction that we need to go, that is the future of our party, and I think it benefits our Parliament and in our country, I was really proud of and inspired by that. So I think, to me, the response after those interviews, I was a little bit hesitant to give them, but I thought they went well, and the response to them, I was really, so that to me was something where I thought, okay, not that I didn't feel unwelcome, but I thought, okay, there is a clear consensus here, I believe, of a strong majority of people that believe our party needs to go this way.
Mumilaaq, I'm interested in what you're thinking about as you're hearing Eric's story, because when we've seen sort of the media response to you since your election, and your response to the media in terms of challenging questions that have been put your way, in terms of the spotlight that's been put on you and the narrow focus sometimes that people have given to your identity. So I'm wondering what you're thinking about when you hear Eric. It's not the same story, but what strikes you or what comes to your mind when you're hearing that story?
I think there's similarities in some ways, but I definitely spend time putting the media on blast, I like to say. And it's having the media talk about what I want them to talk about, and also being able to communicate clearly what we're not talking about. When we're talking about my age, if we take a step back, we're talking about, are you qualified enough? Do you have enough experience? Do you have the education? Do you have the know-how? When we talk about my traditionally inspired tattoos, I leave that alone altogether. I don't want to comment on that. That's mine and mine alone, and who I choose to share it with is my opportunity to do if I wish. But in that as well, it also implies that somebody that looks like this shouldn't be sitting in a seat in Parliament. So in some ways, media is great to be able to share stories and to be able to amplify voices. In some ways, it's not so great when they want that 10, 15-second sound clip, when they want that one quote. So I try my best to make sure that when that happens, it's the way that I want it, and it's the way that I want to present it. Oftentimes, we don't see the federal government do much for Indigenous peoples unless there's international pressure on it. So to me, it's really important that my message is being communicated clearly and effectively in the way that I see fit. And so that I have that to be able to control, because my audience is and I have always been open and transparent, and it's something that I continue to do. And it's interesting in a way where a lot of people don't tell me to waste my time, don't put so much energy and effort. I'm like, no, these are the individuals sharing my story, sharing the story of my constituents, sharing the story of my territory. And not only that, we need to be more open and realize that this isn't just Inuit history. This is Canadian history. This is all of our histories. And when we look at the relation between the federal government and Indigenous peoples across the nation, it's not good. And it continues to stay that way. So to me, it's really important that that message gets communicated in the way that I would like to, in the way I see fit.
And for you, how did you, or what was the thinking behind sort of deciding to really loudly clap back at the media? To, some people, people choose different strategies, right? Some people are like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it and just let it pass. But you decided, or it seems like you decided, no, you're going to take this on and challenge people. Sort of what was going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah, so right from the beginning during campaign, I didn't have a campaign manager. A lot of the things I did on my own, or we had a 100% volunteer, locally based Inuktitut volunteer team. And it was really important to me to make sure that that story is shared on social media, because there are 25 communities in my riding. I cover the largest electoral district in the world, and we're all fly-in, fly-out communities. It costs thousands of dollars. It costs days sometimes to get to certain communities. So to be able to do that reach out and have a response, but to also even just communicate what I've been doing for somebody for what I've been doing during campaigning and since being elected, in somebody in Grise Fjord, where it can cost upwards of over $3,000 to get there, to individuals in Mumilaaq in a totally different part of the territory, or somebody in whatever region it may be. So to me, it's really important to have that national and international audience, sure, but it's much more important to be able to have that line of communication with constituents in my riding.
And Adam, you have a lot of name recognition as well. You have a huge platform as well. When people say, oh, he's the Olympian, what else do you want people to know about what you want to bring to politics and what you hope to do with politics, or what you do bring to politics?
That's a very good question. Before I answer that, I want to just state how incredibly grateful that I am that there is a place for people that look like you, and you specifically, in our house. And I'm so grateful that there is a place for people like you in the Conservative Party, and that we're at a place now where there is a bit more representation within the parties and within the House, because I think it'd be fairly tragic if the House just looked the same from seat to seat to seat and acted the same and lived the exact same life. I don't think a House of Commons is very common or very useful if it's homogenous. And I think the plurality of our House, in terms of its background and experience, but also opinion, is what makes Canada strong. And I'm grateful for people like you guys. What I hope to bring to politics, as I already stated, I was a sportsman on the water. I tried to get along with people from other countries, and I try really hard It's not that hard to get along with you guys because you're great, but there is a little bit of a sense that politics is nasty, and I'm really insistent that it doesn't need to be. I think if we hold ourselves to a high standard in the House of Commons and outside of the House of Commons, then we can see better progress. And I think our chief export in Canada is actually niceness. If you travel around and ask people what they think of when they think of a Canadian, most people say we're pretty nice. And I was thinking about maybe the experience of being a gay guy in a small community is a lot like being a Canadian in Florida, and everybody wants to tell you that they know a Canadian. But Canadians are nice, and we are good people, and we're generous, and we're thoughtful. And I think that our House of Commons is doing a pretty good job representing Canadians. I think we do a better job. I think we can always strive for a better and more representative parliament. But I do like to recognize when progress is being made. Otherwise, if you can't recognize, and even a small step has been taken forward, then I think we might be blind to progress altogether. I work hard. I knocked on a lot of doors, and from my community, I garnered a lot of insight and perspective from people. I hadn't done that before. That was a new practice for me. I was a public speaker after being an athlete and throughout being an athlete, and that meant I was talking a lot, and I was sharing my story a lot. And I recognized that it was really incumbent upon me as a potential representative for people to sit and listen to what folks had to say, to understand their concerns, their priorities, and their issues. And when I first thought about doing this, somebody told me, you're going to have to knock on doors every single day. I thought that was crazy. I thought, knock on doors every single day. Is that really the best way to get in front of a bunch of people? And the answer is yes. There's no better use of your time if you've got 4 or 5 hours than to go and talk to people at their door. It's awkward at first, but you get over it. And I mean, there's people in this room who I met at the door. I met Chris at the door. Sorry to point you out. I knocked on a lot of people's doors over the course of the year, and that provided me with a great foundation for being able to go up to Ottawa and voice their concerns. And it's not just, frankly, the people in Milton and a little sliver of Northern Burlington that I want to represent. It's that plurality of Canada. It's the background and the diversity of experience. Both my parents are immigrants to Canada, and I don't have the typical immigrant experience because I grew up without an accent and I'm white male, so I never had to endure any sort of homophobia or sexism or bigotry or anything like that. But both my parents have an immigrant story, and a lot of Canadians do. Part of that, obligation is recognizing that there's immigrant stories, that are being lived right now. And my riding, being very, very diverse, is one where I take those opportunities to sit and listen to folks really, really seriously. Because that was a little bit of a transition for me, to be totally honest. I wasn't like a counselor. I was somebody that was asked a lot of questions about myself and my experience. And now it's my obligation and responsibility to listen to people about their experiences and hear their concerns. And then when I'm in a committee room or in the House of Commons and I'm asked to stand up and say a few words or to bring some issue to the forefront, it's not my obligation to use my best ideas and my intellect and my university degree to speak to certain issues. It's my obligation to speak for people. I think that's why people put a little X next to my name, is because I told them, I'm willing to go to bat for you, and I'm available for you if you want to sit and chat, and I'm going to be there for you and your family when you want to accomplish your goals. They're shared goals.
Thank you. Before I go to my final questions, I just want to let you know that we do have time for questions from the audience. So if you want to start thinking about your questions while I'm wrapping this up, please feel free to do so. I just want to look forward and ask you guys what you want to get done, because often we don't see MPs other than cabinet getting things done. There's just less opportunity, but all of you have a big platform. And so I'm wondering what you want to get done. And Eric, maybe I'll start with you.
On a small scale, actually, I liked Adam's comment earlier, and it's true, because I say the exact same thing about where I actually at times hate politics in the sense of the bitterness or the nastiness or the games that get played, that type of thing, but rather the public policy and the kind of the nerdy technical side of things at times. But the one thing I think is the tone of our parliament, I think, can improve and be better. I'm one voice of 338, and I tweeted and Facebooked on the first day or first question period. I said, I'm not going to be a clapper or a heckler or yelling across. I think, hopefully to try to set an example. Hasn't gone too far yet, but my colleagues actually have a good sense of humor about it. You'll notice if I ever have a question or intervention in the House, when they announce my riding name, there's an eruption of clapping, and and they clap at the end. It's somewhat sarcastic, but
I've noticed.
So they're hazing you from the inside.
kind of hazing me at that way. But I'd rather have it in a positive light than some of the heckling. But I think kind of bringing a constructive tone to politics is something at a federal level is something that I hope to do. I'm under no illusion. Obviously, there's big differences between our parties and perspectives when it comes to budget and comes to financing. But the line that I've always used in my time in public life and even my personal life is attitude's a small thing that makes a big difference. You can disagree, and the way that you go about that or how you communicate that or what you do with that is something that's important. So, during our local election campaign, I became good friends with, there was 5 of us running in the election. All 5 of us are good friends. We text on a regular basis. We go. I had lunch last week or the week before with my NDP counterpart in the election and the Liberal candidate and PPC candidate. We got together at the PPC candidate's farm after the election and just talked about our experiences and what was there. And people look at us like we have about 2 heads when we do that. But to me, that's just normal of where we debate the politics of the day and our back and forth perspectives and leadership races or what the next thing is. But to me, I just think about tone and approach as something that I think from that's very macro level. But I think from that, we're going to get better policy. And I think we're going to get better governance over the course of time through our committee work, through different things of where, again, I'm not going to pretend that we're all going to align on the budget, for an example, at the end of the day. That's very unlikely to happen. But there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes and how we get there at the end of the day, I think can be improved and something I want to kind of contribute to our parliament, however long I'm there for.
Adam, do you see sort of policies that the Liberals could borrow or, help lift up either from the Conservatives or NDP?
It's a good question, and I would just echo the words of Eric. Disagreeing without being disagreeable is something that I come back to. I think if you're really unwilling to have your mind changed, then you're unwilling to have a frank and honest discussion. I like to sit with my colleagues from other parties because it's not an echo chamber. It's an opportunity to disagree and have an honest and frank discussion and to gain a little bit of that insight and perspective that I said is so valuable. I will say that I think there has been good progress in the last 4.5 years on a number of issues, and certainly there's some that people feel are not moving fast enough, but it's my obligation and something that I feel very strongly about in continuing some of that progress. I grew up in community housing with a single mom. My dad was always around, but I grew up in 2 single-parent families, and I was around poverty as a kid, and it's something that I think in Canada we could do without. I think in Canada we have the power to eliminate poverty, and poverty exists in different communities in different forms. But I honestly and truly, maybe I'm an idealist. People call me naive all the time, but poverty reduction is something that I'm heartened by. I think we can all agree that it's something, regardless of which party you're from. Poverty is not something that we want to see in Canada. I want to see real action on the environment. I think we've seen some good steps in the last 4.5 years, and I think a couple more big ones in the right direction would be great. I think we have an opportunity to collaborate on that as well. I think there's a real interest in Canada in demonstrating a commitment to our environment and commitment to science and evidence-based decision-making around climate change. I got involved partially because I want to have an impact on sport, and when I say that, I don't want to have an impact on high-performance sport. I think high-performance sport's doing fine. I think, the Canadian Olympic Committee.
Especially the Raptors.
They're doing awesome. 15 wins, right? That's incredible. And I mean, no, the Canadian government has nothing to do with the Raptors at all.
You should have taken credit. What were you thinking?
Yeah, sure. The Prime Minister is in Africa right now with Masai Ujiri, but anyway, I won't bring that up. But I think there should be no barriers between any kid and their goals, whether they're sport-based or otherwise. I think that we are living in a land of opportunity, and we should ensure that every child or person has an opportunity to pursue their goals. I'd also like to try to eliminate a lot of the barriers that exist between people and physical activity. We're living in an era where we're fairly consumed by screens all the time. In the corporate world, I used to work down the street at Deloitte, and it seems like a competition to see who's sleeping less and working harder and eating more poorly. And that's not an ambition that I strive for, and I don't think that's an ambition that Canadians should strive for. The gift that sport, my experience as an athlete, gave me most is perspective through the travel that I was afforded the opportunity to take. I went and competed in 45 countries, and I trained in 15 other ones. I went to Africa and the Middle East and throughout Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, and spent almost all my summers in Europe. And it was to represent Canada, but I was also there to learn about other countries and how they're done elsewhere. And if we could conduct a few best practices studies on why certain countries are doing certain things really, really well. You look at Finland and their commitment to education at even like a kindergarten level. Sweden and Norway are doing a great job too. Portugal passed one of the most progressive laws on decriminalizing drugs. And these things are making a big difference elsewhere. And I think oftentimes Canada's so big, but we exist in a little bit of a siloed vacuum. And I think looking across the ocean or across a border or two and saying, hey, they're doing a really good job with that, something we could emulate. I know for a fact a lot of countries are looking at Canada, and in particular some of our immigration policies, because they're working really, really well. So I think we should do the same thing and look outward sometimes.
I'll leave Mumilaaq with the final word from my questions. Is there something specific or a particular issue that you want to see driven forward in this Parliament?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of my conversations revolve about basic human rights. We know that over 30% of my constituents are living in overcrowded housing or don't have access to housing. We know that 7 out of 10 children in my constituency go to school hungry. We also know that, unfortunately, Nunavut holds the title of suicide that's about 10 to 11 times higher than the rest of the country, and we've held that title for a long time. A lot of these issues can be traced back to basic human rights, being able to feed yourselves and your family, having a safe place to live, and having clean drinking water. And it's a conversation that has been happening for decades, unfortunately, in Nunavut. And I think myself, as that fresh voice, can hopefully, over whatever amount of time that we have in the House, not be talking about those things whether or not I decide to run again. And then we can start talking about economic development, post-secondary education opportunities. Then we can start talking about things that we should already be talking about in Canada. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm talking about basic human rights in a lot of the work that I do, and opportunity to tackle those issues in different ways is something that I try and open that discussion, create that discussion of going back to that. The reality for me in Northern Canada is different from the reality here. And just being able to create that dialogue to have that open discussion and understand that things like mental health services might not look the same in the territory. How we teach each other and how we learn that post-secondary opportunities or school opportunities might look different from what they look like down here. So I'm hoping that the discussions around basic human rights won't be something that I have to do after this term, because it's something that my constituents have in my writing.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We have a few minutes for questions, and I'm not sure if anybody has any. Michelle, I don't know if you have a mic. And if you could just say your name and keep your question brief.
Hi, I'm Michelle Eaton, and my question for all three of you is, first of all, thank you all for a great panel, and Marieke, you're fabulous as always. What's the weirdest or funniest or craziest story you can say about since you started? Because I'm sure, like, in beautiful stories and wonderful experiences, but what's the thing you've gone home and been like, holy shit, this just happened to me, you know? Like,
Anyone come to mind, Eric?
So I say every day I have these pinch me moments of something. So walking into the chamber for the first time as a new member, asking the first question, your maiden speech, and all those things. But actually, it was just last Friday. I was in the CTV studios on Queen Street in Ottawa to do an interview with Todd Vanderhayden. And I went into the green room there at CTV, and Bob Fife, Nick Nanos, Evan Solomon, Tonda McCharles, and Stephanie Levitz were in the room. And I spent about 10 minutes just shooting the breeze, talking politics with them. And I went, holy crap, this is cool. So to see them on TV, just to see them out and about in the country and the reporting that they do, kind of being in the inside lens, where actually when I walked in, they all knew who I was. I think it was a good thing. But that was just a neat experience that way, of the access to different things, and even different ministers, being able to walk across to talk to Mark Garneau and to say, can we chat about this issue and that type of thing. That for me, last Friday, some of those pinch me moments when you walk into some of these rooms, there's been a few times where it's like, wow, this is a pretty cool experience.
I think you've just established your nerd credentials in Ottawa, because most people do not have a pinch me moment for meeting a bunch of journalists, but I'll make sure to pass it on to my boss and get you some more brownie points. Mumilaaq or Adam, does anything come to mind?
I sit right behind Jagmeet, our party leader, in the House. And Inuit, when we raise our eyebrows, we're saying yes or agreeing with you. And when we scrunch our nose, we're saying no or we're disagreeing with you. So about every time Jagmeet leaves the House, he asks me a question where I need to say yes, and I can't leave until I raise my eyebrows. And he missed me one day, so I was sitting in the lobby. I always have my sealskin and I'm putting stuff away, and he's like, "Mumilaaq, you're a member of parliament." And I was like, yeah. And because I strive to push for things to look different, you know, I wear this kind of outfit in the House, and I push against those norms to show, you know, we can all belong here. So I thought I was going to get in trouble for not wearing a suit or a blazer or something. And he was like, "No, Mumilaaq, you're an MP." And I was like, "Yes, I am, Jagmeet." And he was like, "No, Mumilaaq." And I was like, "Oh, gotcha." And he was like, "One more time, Mumilaaq, you're a member of parliament." And I raised my eyebrows, and he was like, "There we go, that's where it is." So I think it's kind of, to me, just very heartwarming to have a party leader like that goes out of his way, not even out of his way, just is accommodating to make you feel like you're supported and you belong, and that's exactly what he does, and I'm very thankful for that.
Awesome. Anything with you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm also grateful for, you know, feeling like I'm part of a team. A lot of members of Parliament have reached out to, you know, offer their guidance, and I relied on mentorship a lot in my previous life. I always, you know, followed older and faster guys around when I had the opportunity to get on the water with somebody that was better than me. I definitely embraced it. So when Mark Garneau specifically has time for me, I definitely take that. And there's been a lot of weird moments. I'm not Mr. Van Koeverden, that's my dad, and I get Mr. Van Koeverden all the time now. I'm like, that's just not gonna work. I'm not gonna be Mr. Van Koeverden for, you know, now I think we've been going in and out of our offices often enough now that we can avoid the security, and they see you from far away and they open the door for you, like with a little button, and this, you know, you don't need to swipe your pass or anything, and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Van Koeverden." It's like so weird for me to called that. I'm not a teacher or my father, but there's been a lot of pinch me moments, and just even sitting in the House of Commons while, you know, it's all going on. The theater of Parliament is in its fullest splendor. There's a lot of moments where I sit there going like, I can't believe that I'm here. I didn't watch Question Period on TV like growing up. I don't come from a particularly political family. I started caring about politics when my mom came home in the 90s. She was building co-ops with a housing cooperative group, and she lost her job because the provincial, you know, premier changed, and that's when I started caring about politics. Like, why does a premier affect my mom's job and our ability to, you know, just to have a normal life? But again, it's never really been about party stripe or any of those sorts of things. But the sense of being on a team is a strong one, I think. And I would just come back to the fact that we are younger. I'm the older one, by the way. It wasn't brought up, but we are younger, and I think that this attitude that I think all three of us share, and many other members, and it doesn't really matter what age you are, there's a lot of people who also just sort of put off by the combativeness or that aggressive theater that goes on. The pinch me moments have definitely come out of, you know, handshakes with people that I respect, regardless of their background or party. An opportunity to sit and discuss things with colleagues from across Canada, and a shared, you know, obligation to do good for people in our country. I keep realizing that, you mentioned it, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this, but I really don't want to look back on this time and think that I wasted it. So I wake up every single day and think, like, how am I going to make this 2 or 4 or 6 or 10 years worth it? And I hope I do.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has one. Yeah. Does anybody have a mic?
Hi there, my name is Shiv Ruparel. So I hate to beleaguer, you know, the LGBTQ plus point, but I just want to say, you know, as a young gay man from a very deep blue riding in Calgary, it makes me quite happy to see many gay members of Parliament on stage. My question specifically is for you, Eric. I think, you know, taking it a step beyond the whole marching and pride debate going on with the party right now leading up to the leadership race, what do you think that the Conservative Party can do concretely beyond just having a leader march in pride to send a message to LGBTQ plus voters to say, we will defend your rights, we'll stand up for the community, you deserve our vote? What measures do you think the party should take to send that message to Canadians? Thank you.
Great question. And actually, as the premise of that about the pride parades, marching in them or not marching in them, that to me has been a frustrating point in the sense of where, to me, it's an act in terms of marching in the parade. I'd be more impressed what we're going to be doing in Parliament or what we're going to be doing from advocacy, from policy, those type of things, tangible results for those types of things. The example that I always use is somebody says, well, somebody said to me, if you don't march and haven't marched in a pride parade, you don't support rights. I never have. My town of Winchester does not have a pride parade yet. Maybe they will someday, but for me, it's never been. Now, this year, I think with our leadership race being on the Saturday, Pride being on the Sunday, I'm looking forward to marching in Toronto Pride this year. But to me, that's a check mark, something we'll do. But to your point is, when we come up, there's going to be some issues in this term of Parliament that our figures are going to have to be dealing with, our parliamentarians. If it's conversion therapy, if it is the blood ban for gay men donating blood, those are things that are going to have to be dealt with. So I think the tone and the information, how we have those conversations, I think are going to be very important. And I think Canadians are going to be watching, where I've been very happy with many of the candidates in the leadership race and many people talking about, being, I keep using the word socially relevant all the time and moving in that direction. But I think actions are going to speak louder than words, and actions not being in a pride parade or not, but in Parliament and being constructive when some of those issues come up. That, frankly, is going to be a test for us. I'm anxious for that and nervous for that to see how that all goes. But I think that's something where it's going to be the test for our party. I think for all Parliament, actually, from different parties, as we balance some of those factors and how we handle that.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being so open and honest and generous with your time. There's lots of time after to mix and mingle, so I hope you guys will stick around, and I'll turn it over to Mike.
I'm gonna ask the super smart Dan Moulton from Crestview to offer a proper appreciation.
Thank you very much, Mike. On behalf of the whole team here from Crestview Strategy and our team in Ottawa, I'd just like to thank all of you for coming out tonight and purchasing a ticket and joining us for this discussion. I'd like to thank the staff at the Empire Club for their hard work in bringing this panel together and bringing this event together. Marieke, that was an exceptional panel. I know you put a lot of preparation and dedication into the questions that were asked tonight, so thank you very much for making this a lively evening. And finally, I'd just like to thank each of our panelists for their time, for traveling to be here tonight. I think you represent a lot more than a new class of MPs after an election. I think you each represent generational change in our politics and in each of your parties. So thank you very much.
Just in closing, I'll tell you that quickly we're doing an event on electric vehicles, the Road to Relevance. I think it will be interesting. That's on February 21st. And the other event I will highlight is on March 9th. We have Vickery Bowles. She's the chief librarian from Toronto Library, who stood up about free speech in a really declarative way. Check those out, other events like that on the Empire Club website. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.